Good evening and welcome to the Executive Elevation Experience. My name is Shireen Motara and I'm the CEO of Tara Transform. I'm also a certified coach that works with women executive leaders. And today I am so pleased to have with us my friend, my sister, my client, my mentor, Lebo Ramafoko. Lebo, I'm so happy to have you here. Please tell those few people who don't know about you something about you.
So I am 51 years old and I am currently the executive director at Oxfam South Africa. I've been in leadership positions of various social justice organizations, the longest being at the well-known Soul City Institute for Social Justice, where I spent 24 years, and passionate about issues of young women and girls. I am a feminist, even before feminism was as popular and as fashionable as it is right now. And I think for me, every time we are challenging patriarchy and we are fighting for equity and the full expression and realization of women's lives in all of their orientation, trans women, women who identify in any form, that's what gives me life.
Yes, I know, and I get full of energy when I'm with you in those spaces. So definitely, I know that. Of course, Lebo, we know also that in doing this difficult feminist work, it takes a lot out of us. So my first question to you is, how did you put yourself first this week?
So the way I put myself first this week, I live alone. And one of the things that can happen is that, and I used to do that, the last thing that you look at is your laptop, and the first thing that you look at is your laptop. The discipline I have cultivated, and this week I wasn't as good, I must be honest, is making sure that even when I rise early, I don't open the laptop first. I make sure that I basically, do whatever morning ritual I have, whether it's prayer. I think about what am I going to eat. And then only after I have done things that feed my soul, I will open the laptop. And then except for one evening, there's also that thing. And that's why I'm so happy we are back at the office, where I don't even take out the laptop from the bag, so that there is a separation of my time and the time that I give to my work.
Yeah, and that's so important. I think that's one of the first things that I always check with my coaching clients as well, because I think women leaders, there's a tendency to overwork, there's a tendency to focus on getting things done and so on. And the thing with the laptop, taking the laptop to watch TV, taking the laptop to the bedroom, taking the laptop while you're cooking, is becoming quite an issue. So I'm really happy you were able to do that, and please do more of that.
Thank you.
On the other hand, Lebo, I also know you and admire you for being able to have fun.
Yes.
So I'm not really good at that. So I really like live through you when you are having fun. Tell me a little bit about how that features in your life and why it's so important for you.
So my having fun is actually a spiritual process, and it's a spiritual practice. And let me tell you what, I mean, it is not lost to me that a girl from Manziville, which is also how I define myself, 5,000 households, many of them living below the poverty line, could have gotten to where I came to, given the systemic and structural challenges that Black people still face in this country. And so I live a life of gratitude. And for me, a life of gratitude is a life of bringing people together, laughing, eating, talking. And I deal with my trauma through laughter. I mean, I want to be with people, and no matter what is happening, which is, I think, a gift that many of our grandmothers, particularly as Black women, has gifted us with. I mean, You would meet them as domestic workers. I've got memories when I was younger where my mother's, was it my aunt or my mother's aunt? My mother's aunt would visit, and that evening, in a two-roomed house, whether you were 12 or 13, the adults would be talking until 4 a.m. and they would be laughing and they would be updating each other. When it's the funeral, the aunties in the bedroom, apart from, pouring countless cups of tea, they are talking. And that's how we deal with our pain. We eat, we laugh, we console each other. We were not people to go and sit with a therapist and really go through one-on-one therapy sessions. And for me, it stayed. I love people. I love bringing people together. I organize events, but it's a form of spiritual practice. It's my church. It's the form of bringing people together and recognizing that in my journey, there has been so many people who have lent a hand. There's so many shoulders on whom I stand, and that's my church. My church is bringing people together and absolutely having fun. But also, Shireen, the soft life is nice. The life where you absolutely give to yourself. And I got into it very late, I must say. I had my first child when I was 20 years, 11 months. She was born when I turned 20 years, 11 months on the dot, a month before I turned 21. And throughout my life, all I wanted to do was to be a good parent. I would forgo things. It's only much later that I give to myself first.
And there's so much in what you're saying there, Lebo, about our multidimensional lives as women, and also the self-sacrificing way in which I think in some ways we were taught, but also which we kind of adopted, and which sometimes as feminists we think is what we need to do. So I really draw strength from you doing that, and the soft life issue as well. I think I totally agree with you. Like, at what point in our lives must we be happy? At what point in our lives must we be relaxing, and doing and enjoying, all the hard labor that we've put forward for everyone else? Lebo, I've experienced you as a deeply compassionate and generous leader, but also quite decisive and visionary. And I want you to talk to us a little bit about how each of those qualities serve you and how else you think you show up as a leader.
So, wow, it's a difficult question to answer, and I must credit my mother. I think when I was young, I really, really clashed and butted heads with my mother. And now that she's no longer alive, I realize that it's because I'm my mother. I'm really my mother. And my mother was not afraid. My mother was not afraid to say what she thought in the manner that she thought, sometimes where you would cringe. And I think that kind of role modeling is important, where you actually can state what you say. But I see both of them as two sides of the same coin. So in the workplace, where I find young people, where I find people who really want to learn and want to excel for themselves, I can be very generous and very compassionate. But I also know that I am very impatient with mediocrity. And I'm also very impatient with what has become the politics of the day, as I find, where what we say is not what we mean, what we do is not necessarily what we say. And we are all in this game, I can't do that. And that's where you find me very, like, my latest phrase in my current work is, just tell me if you don't want to do it. Like, don't tell me a story. Just tell me I don't want to do it, because I know what I'm dealing with. And I think for me, how it serves me is that for a very long time, and I see it even in younger women and even in older women, we almost must be very apologetic for the spaces of leadership we enter into. So it's almost as if when you enter a place of leadership, you owe the people respectability, you owe the people niceness. And there are so many people, even in corporate South Africa, in NGOs, who will know that a particular male leader is this way. But it will almost be a good attribute for a man if they show up in the space that way. But lo and behold, you come in bold, sure of yourself, loud like myself. It's like, what kind of a woman is it? And so it serves me because I absolutely wear my feminist beliefs in my hand, to be saying I'm going to come in my, in everything that I am. And a number of people have said, you've got a large personality. And I made a decision very early on, probably in my 30s, that I don't owe anybody to almost hide or sanitize myself to be acceptable as a woman. So it serves me in the politics. But the compassion serves me in building a tribe around me. So no matter what I am going through, the women that I bring around me, and I'm glad that you have been one of those, in the different ways that we work with each other, because they know my compassion and they know my heart. Even when the world has been very unkind to me, I know that in my circle of women that I interact with, I can go and be as vulnerable as I want. And that's how it serves me. And that's why I say it's two sides of the same coin. And so the compassion and the generosity, it's not only paying it forward, but it's depositing into a bank that from time to time, as women leaders, we want to come in and draw from. Because whether it's a woman in politics, it's a woman in the corporate sector, is a woman on social media, we know the harsh world that we live in. And therefore, every opportunity to build each other, to support each other, is an opportunity to deposit into this bank. Because we are all on our own. We are occupying spaces in our private lives, in our public lives, in our professional lives, where we are only relying on ourselves. So you better deposit into that bank where your other women are going to hold you and they are going to be there for you. And even when the world attacks you and the people are out there to attack you, what works is when a woman says, I'm here for you, I'm rooting for you. They don't even have to announce it to the world. But the kind of generosity, the kind of leadership where you've got a tribe comes in handy. And it's also an authentic kind of life. I'm a feminist because I want to see a better world. And I believe in a better world. I want a world where I have no care in the world. And I remember listening at the Nelson Mandela Foundation to Albie Sachs, who said, when he got the parcel bomb that made him lose his arm, he says, in fact, all we wanted was a boring life. We wanted to go to the beach. We wanted to laugh what we wanted. We wanted to stay where we wanted. It's not extraordinary that women want. We want to walk down the road without losing our lives. We want to be in careers without being undermined. So my compassion comes from the fact that that is the world that I want. I want a world of care, of love, of abundance that I believe we all deserve.
So profound. And I think part of what you are saying is also that in all of that, we must have solidarity with each other. And that's also the fuel that keeps us going. But linked to that, I mean, I've been observing a number of conversations around feminist organizations of late, but not just in South Africa, globally as well. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that whilst feminist organizations are fighting for certain things externally, of course, wanting to change the world, create a better world, challenge the patriarchy, challenge power, challenge dominance and privilege, internally in the organizations and in ourselves as feminists, we are not really doing that. So I wanted to get your take on that. What do you think about that?
That is so true. Sadly so. It's not a matter to laugh at. I giggle when I'm nervous. So that was a nervous giggle. I think I think fighting patriarchy is very tiring. And I think what has happened in feminist organizing is we absolutely don't take the time to reflect on whether or not we are doing the necessary work, which is for me the work of reflecting on even our own practices, to really reflect on how we treat each other, to reflect on how we compete. And in a lot of ways, I find that the issues of money and fundraising and positionality and the tiring work that we do has made us default into very problematic default settings of I am only better if Shireen is not doing well. And I am only better if the people talk to me. And I mean, one of the conversations that we need to have is how much of it is a capture of the feminist space. And capture happens in different ways. Capture happens when rather than focus on what we are about, we start focusing on how we police each other and how, we start fighting amongst ourselves, and how much intolerance, so the intolerance we experience in the world, how much it comes into the feminist space, and how the feminist space has become less and less a space to learn, but it's become a space to really be violent against each other. I mean, for the first time in my life, in people being critical of me, the first thing that they said was like, well, the 51-year-old Ramafoko, which is a title I wear, the sexiest boudoir photo shoot I did when I was 50. So it was like, oh my God, they are noticing. But that's beside the point. And I can tell you now that there were women who either participated in writing that article or distributed it. And that was my own personal experience of seeing how patriarchy really makes us fight against each other. And while also and I've been part of really working with, supporting, bringing up young feminists, how in those spaces, it's almost like, no, let the young people, and you guys don't have something to contribute. And I think we are tired, I think. And I think we've been infiltrated. And when I say infiltrated, I'm talking about the politics of money. I'm talking about how all of a sudden when money comes in, it basically comes in. And in a lot of ways, we start thinking, I'm only better when Shireen is not. And feminist work works when we are isolated, when a few of us are called by the powers that be and isolate us. But I think more importantly, and it may sound like a contradiction, when there isn't enough resources to fund feminist work, there isn't enough resources for us to just stop and reflect. So how many times do you have time, Shireen? How many times do you have time to sit and say, am I being the most effective organizer, mobilizer, thinker, whatever the role that is being required? Am I being? And it's going to take a lot of internal work. Feminism happens the most when you are reflecting. And we are all sitting with contradictions. Sometimes what we preach in the workplace is not the same that we live in our own lives. Sometimes what we live in our own lives goes contrary to the very feminism that we are preaching. Sometimes the way we lead in order to succeed is very contrary to the feminism that we espouse. Sometimes the feminism that we espouse makes it very difficult for us to lead. Where is the space and the money and the time for us to sit? And I'm like, shucks, man, I've tried, I've tried to be a feminist leader. But I do think that all that happens is that people take you for granted, and then they do this, or I tried this theory, doesn't work, or you know what? I actually just want to have a patriarchal husband so that I don't pay the bills. Or wife. Where is the space for us to come in and say, because what happens? Have you seen on social media? Oh, a woman is missing. What have the feminists said? And it's almost as if the cheese is being dangled and we are on a treadmill, we are running, get to the cheese, and we are not getting to the cheese. And patriarchy wins because all we do is we are getting so tired. But it's not delivering anything for us. And I think the movement at this point in time, the patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist order has become part of the way we interact. But it's also because we don't have the time to do internal work. I wish after every 3 years, I had the opportunity to take a break, to get off, to go somewhere, not worry about my bills, not worry about who's going to pay for my food, and know that I can go in and sit there and reflect. I'm in my third job, a second job since Soul City, so my third in a leadership position. And I've not afforded 6 months to just walk away and think and write and reflect. And that is why we are not even able to tell our own stories and really leave a legacy for younger feminists that come. They must catch us on this treadmill as we are fighting for yet another injustice.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that because, so much of what you said resonates with me, but also gives me a lot of food for thought. And I think it's a conversation we should continue and see where it goes. There's a question in the comments that I want to share with you. Tembisa says, being vulnerable as a woman leader is not easy. Why is it important to admit vulnerability? How do you do it?
So true. So true. Women leaders are forever under a microscope because we enter boardrooms and we enter leading spaces, even in NGO spaces that we did not create. We enter spaces where we were not expected to be there in the first place. So the spaces are not tolerant. We absolutely must be vulnerable for 2 reasons that I can think of the top of my head. Because I think that is the beauty that we offer what leadership is about. I think when we are unable as women leaders to come in and redefine what leadership is and how we lead, we don't we don't emulate and role model for younger people what it takes to lead. And the best compliment that has been paid to me by young leaders in my previous job where we were running a fellowship was many young women said to me, thank you for making me realize that I am enough and I can just show up as I am. And I would say to them, I would minimize it or not even think about it. I'm like, what do you mean? And say, you laugh, you swear, you cry, you twerk, you speak about a lot of things, you cry, you do all of these things. So we've seen all of you, and you are very funny and whatever, and you bring it in the workplace. And it's until recently that I realized how many women in their journey of leadership live with anxiety of just holding their breath and, oh my God, they can't know that yesterday I made a mistake, or I don't know Excel, which is my truth. I don't know Excel. I've got a mental block around it, or I make a mistake. Whereas when you watch men be mediocre or make mistakes, it's a given. because the platform is created for them. So, and I know not all spaces allow vulnerability. And that other question of being a compassionate leader is, please create a space, find a mentor, find a group where you can go and you have to say, shucks, I didn't see that coming. Oh my goodness. And be with people who are going to make you believe and know that they love you even at your weakest because they believe in you. And that if you can't even demonstrate it as a leader, and I think the older you become, I'm like, take me as I am, this is what you get. But for younger women in particular who are getting into corporate, who are getting into spaces where they feel like, oh, there's no space, seek out people. And I think that is why, Shireen, the space that you've created is so important, because I think whether it's in the area of sex or relationship or work, one of the things that patriarchy has done, it has denied older women, and now that we are becoming 51-year-old women, that we are not telling young women the truth, that it's going to be okay. That thing that you are spending sleepless nights on, quite honestly, is not the worst that you could have done. And that is why these spaces are important. And if you can't build it now, please find people that you can be real with, because even in our own personal relationships, there's so much conflict, because patriarchy is clever. It says to us, if only you behave this way. Have you seen Lebo? Do you want us to do to you what we did to Lebo? If you don't want that, don't behave like Lebo. Personally, privately, professionally. And so you feel so isolated because you want to fit in. You won't fit in. You can be the slimmest, the tallest, the most humble. Let me tell you a story at 51. After trying to knock myself in all shapes to fit in, you won't. Let me tell you where you are free. Have you gotten home and removed your bra and your corset and everything that's holding it together? Take it all off and be yourself. But if you can't, come to spaces that are safe, where other women can hold you and say, take it all off.
I mean, linked to that, I'm just thinking about this issue of age and maturity, and how we have matured as leaders, and how different we see the world. Because of course we've all been young, and when we see the young ones, we think, oh well, you will learn the lesson eventually, right? But what would you say to young leaders, or to women aspiring to be executive leaders, about what they should think about when they're moving in that direction, aside from what the society generally says about, as you say, how women should be, and what kind of leaders they should be, and so on.
Give yourself multiple doses of compassion. The worst thing that I've realized that I did for, I think the bulk of my years, was being my worst critic, was doing 20 things correct and one thing not correct, and dwelling on that one thing that I did not do correctly. And I think that for me is that. But there is also something creeping in, which I think is a very capitalist Western thing, that is being unteachable, that I'm seeing creeping. And this is when I now begin to sound like a 51-year-old. Other times I'm cool, I'm the cool auntie. But on this one, I know I'm beginning to sound my age. Being teachable means being willing and humble enough to hear when others are saying, this is not the way you should be going, even when you are on a winning streak, because often we've watched bright young women who are like, oh, I'm the it, and that's what the world does. Oh, I'm the it. Then it comes and it claps you. And you've alienated everybody so much that, somebody else must feel real sorry and compassion for you. So show yourself compassion, but really be teachable and be willing to unlearn so many things that universities teach you, society teach you, capitalism teaches you, patriarchy teaches you, that you are the it. We were all it at some point in time until patriarchy realizes that it is the only it, not us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Lebo. And I think that that's so important, and I've observed that as well. And I do think that sometimes, as the older feminists, we are seen as being outdated and not adding value and so on. But of course, we have a lot to offer. And having intergenerational relationships as feminists, I think, is so critically important. So thanks so much for that. I totally agree with you. Okay, we at the end, but I wanted to ask you a final question about leading in an international NGO space. So, of course, we know that there's a lot of discussion and issues around what's happening in the international NGO space. Your organization is aligned to those international NGOs. But what I want to ask from you is, as an African feminist leader, how are you showing up in that space, and what are you thinking about as a leader in working in that space?
So I think for me, it's been an interesting phase because, of course, the way the international world deals with you is in two ways. One, it's you are one of a few. So everybody wants you because you are one of a few. And there are attempts, and I think genuine attempts, to say we need to be decolonial. I know in Oxfam, South Africa, we want to be decolonial, and we really mean it. And it's a value that everybody is working towards. And so you get into a space where your value as a Black leader, let alone a Black feminist leader, is recognized. What it then does on the other end, though, is that the burden that you carry is huge. Because, of course, with a lot of the things at a global level, at a local level, there are contestations. You can imagine at a global level how much of contestations they are. So, on one level, the temptation of sitting very comfortably in a place that embraces you as a Black woman and a Black feminist woman, meaning I have a seat at the table. It's one that is quite welcoming, but on another level, it's a huge burden because a lot of the things that are discussed, a lot of the postures that happen at an international level are contested. So it's almost a very schizophrenic existence because I often find myself that I am doing double work in these meetings I'm processing it as a person at the seat at the table, but I'm processing it as a person in the global south, where is that we are not all on the table and we are not all equal at the table. And so what is the kind of dance that you have to have? It's very complex. I can't say to you, being new in an international NGO, that I formulated my space. My thoughts. But doing it at this stage in my career where I really don't think I've got a lot to prove, although sometimes that imposter syndrome still creeps in and you think, oh, I've got to prove. As some friends, whom we shall not mention, told us, you've got nothing to prove, which is just Tara. You get to a point where you say, no, I'm going to just be very honest and open and bring subjects in a discussion that I don't think anybody else is thinking about. And I'm not going to do it from a position of fear, but I'm going to bring it to the sense that having a seat at the table is really being accepted and acceptable, and also giving yourself permission to even bring what you deem may be seen as uncomfortable perspectives to the table.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, what stands out for me from what you said is authenticity and vulnerability again, because of course, as you say, at the age that we are, um, we're at a point where we no longer care much about what others think of us, but really that we are true and authentic in how we show up in any space. And of course, that's what I love about you. I find you wherever I may find you, you are the same, Lebo, and I deeply, deeply appreciate that.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Shir.
making the time to be with me this evening, Lebo. I think based on the comments, there's been a lot of feedback, and people are really, really happy with this discussion and so enamored by what you've said. I think there were still a couple of questions. I think Tumi asked, do you think feminism is regressing, especially when looking at the loud populist patriarchal male voices that rise up in popular culture? But I think you've said a lot about that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think we must accept that, like many things, feminism will go through different phases, and there will be phases where we really are very clear about what is the call to action, and we must go, at it. And there will be moments where that call to action is clear. I think we are at a point where that call to action is not very clear, and we are seeing how we are all trying to look and saying, okay, who's going to show direction, what's going to happen, and I think it's the thing, it's change is not linear. It's like this. And even at times when we think we are regressing, even when things are becoming populist, while it's confusing because we are mortal beings and we live in this moment, there are indeed moments where we are going to come together. And I think even this confusion helps us to define. And that is why I talk about where is the moment where we regroup and we say, how are we showing up in a very, very different world?
Thank you for that. I wanted to share to Miss question. On that powerful note, let's end. Thanks so much, Lebo. I hope to see you soon and not just on the screen.
Absolutely.
It was really lovely to have you here, and of course, showing up in your full authenticity, which I deeply appreciate.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very much.
for joining us this evening, everyone. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.